nobody gets a pension by working 2 or 3 years. It takes 5 years to vest, and then it's the formula. So after 5 years, and you're at 2% at 55, and say you went in at 50, and now you retire at 55, you're only going to get 10% of that salary. Right. Now, what's a problem is what's called spiking. That's where you have a pension, and a buddy say, "Hey, come work for us over here in Southgate."
2 years, right? Yeah.
Come work over here in Southgate, and you were say a probation officer making, or you retire out at whatever, $80,000 a year. But what happens is you go there, work over there for a year, and now it's based on $200,000 as opposed to $100,000.
Because you took all of your sick time and comp time and you put it in there, and
it was really based on the salary.
On the salary.
Because
okay.
it's your highest salary.
Well,
and so you can fix that by doing a highest 3-year average or whatever. There's ways of solving the problem. And
I know at the Metropolitan Water District, they used to let you accumulate your sick leave, and I knew people, because I worked there, who had 20 years of sick leave they never used.
Yeah.
So when they retired, they not only got their retirement, they got their sick leave, and which they put a stop to.
Right.
You have to use it up at, I think, 2 years, and if you don't, you lose it.
Right.
On pensions, I got what I put in and what the district contributed.
Right.
There was no Social Security.
Right, for you, that's right.
And then after, see, I retired in '94 from there, and a few years later, they started deducting both Social Security
Right.
and pension.
That's right. That's right.
And
so people are paying for their
Yeah.
pensions. So there are some abuses and easily solved, and many of the local entities have done their homework and and solved the problem. And quite frankly, the state issue really is between the state unions and the governor,
mm-hmm.
because they negotiate contracts and they negotiate salary and all that. And that's really something that's between the governor and the unions.
does the legislature have to ratify those agreements?
Yes, they do. They do have to ratify. They do have to ratify. And I just think that there's when you sign on for any job, there's a compact between the employer and the employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I don't believe in going back and undoing that compact.
So if you get elected, how many more years do you get to serve in the legislature under the current rules?
I have 2 years in the assembly,
Okay.
1 term.
All right.
And then I would have 2 terms, which would be 8 years in the Senate.
Okay. Or Board of Equalization or wherever.
Well, that's a whole new office.
In a new office.
That's a whole new office with a new term.
Okay.
So 10 years total in the legislature.
I've always wanted to ask you this question. I mean, it sounds like the Calderons are kind of like your business is government in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And is that a positive? Is it a negative in these particular days? Or
I think
is it just because of what the family does?
Well, first of all, it's a huge positive.
Okay.
And my brother Chuck, who's now just terming out in the assembly, would have been in the Senate today if not for term limits. And he was a very effective legislator, and it is a very effective legislator. And I just believe that the voters look at us and they do their homework and they say, we're going to support you. Nobody's given me this office. I have to work for it. And I'm out there interviewing, just like I'm doing now, with employee groups and with constituency groups, and I'm all over the place talking to anybody who'll listen and asking for their vote. And if you believe that I'll serve you the best, then vote for me. If you don't, vote for somebody else.
Well, what do you think of term limits?
All
what would you
together.
like to see done with them?
Term limits are terrible because it doesn't give a legislator in either house enough time to really understand and be conversant on the issues. They're very complicated. I've been working on work comp issues since I've been out of the legislature, and I was chair, and I carried the first bill in 20 years to increase permanent disability. The governor vetoed that 2 times before I carried it, and you finally got a signature from the governor. You talk workers' comp with anybody, really, in about 5 minutes, their eyes are rolling back in their head and they're checking their email, and it's because it's very complicated. It's a very complicated issue, and how we deal and how we serve the injured people, people injured on the job in the state of California. But that's just one issue. We don't have a coherent water policy in the state.
You've done a lot of consulting with water companies over the past couple of years since you've been out of the legislature. Is that a positive? Is that a negative? Is that
Well, what
I know that the LA Times has done some stories.
Yeah,
recently.
well, what I've been trying to do is, again, I was talking earlier about turf battles. People don't want their turf disturbed, and what's going on this whole water thing is that the private water companies want to take the resource, our resource of storing water in the Central Basin, and they want to privatize it, okay? What's going on and why there's this big fight and why, people are attacking me and attacking Central Basin is that the Water Replenishment District cut a deal with the private water companies that said that if they don't put any water, if they don't take any water out of the basin, it's considered storage, okay? And water companies that have water rights in both West and Central Basin can monetize their water rights in West Basin, because right now there are stranded interests. What I mean is that basin is so polluted with seawater, they can't take any more water out of there. They've overdrafted that basin. So what WRD wanted to do, and which we fought when we went to court to stop it, is they wanted to allow, let's say, Golden State Water Company, allow them not to say, okay, we're not going to take any water out over here, but that gives us credit over here in Central Basin. So it created an asset for them that doesn't exist now on paper. So because in the Constitution it says water is the people's property, okay? And so there's an effort to privatize the water rights in the Central Basin that we're fighting.
So just real quick, did you you work as a consultant
Yeah,
on behalf of the Central Basin Water Board?
correct.
To go ahead and deal with these particular issues.
That's right.
Okay.
They make all the decisions. I just advise them.
You just
Don't
advise
they
them.
have a freshwater barrier to keep the salt water out of the basin?
Well, what they
Or
do,
did-
they have to continually pump water in to keep the salt
Yeah.
water from coming in. Now, the dirty little secret about WRD is that they have a blended water replenishment fee with West and Central Basin. That means that they take the total cost of water replenishment and they say they have a single rate for the both basins. Well, the science is that West Basin costs twice as much to replenish that district, that basin, than Central Basin, because of all the salt water that's coming in and the pollution that exists in that area.
Do you think, as a member of the legislature, would you make it a priority to go ahead and rethink and possibly start legislation to rethink how water is governed in California? Because don't you think there's too many water districts and water boards or do you think they're just fine, or keep it the way it is?
Well, Mark Twain said, "Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting," and it's true. And people have water rights that they want to protect, and so these basins have been adjudicated, and so there's been all these court battles that have sort of set up who owns what and what happens in this situation or that situation. And so it's complicated. Again, it's another very, very complicated issue. Okay, but to simplify what's going on in the Central Basin, which is this area, is that we need to do storage. We could probably store somewhere around 700,000 acre feet in Central Basin. That is about the size of Diamond Lake, which is the last reservoir that was built in California back in, and I think it was 2000. Okay, you're familiar with me from Met. But we have this resource. But in order to do it, we got to make sure once we put the water in, we can take it out. What happens with replenishment? There's all these issues. So we just have to, slog, no pun intended, slog through these issues, and we always remember that water is a public resource.
Well, let me ask you another question. For years, there's been a battle between Northern and Southern California
Absolutely.
over the water coming down into the Delta area.
Right.
Now, at one time, I think in the 80s, was it? They were going to build a peripheral canal.
Correct.
And the voters in Northern California killed it.
Right.
Okay, now they're talking about a bypass.
Right.
And the whole crux of the thing is, if there's a major earthquake, the Delta is no more.
Right.
And there goes our water supply.
That's right.
So everything we have down here will slowly disappear.
Right.
Because there won't be any water to replenish.
Right.
Colorado River can't do it anymore.
Right.
So how does that fit into the overall picture?
Well, we have to do the conveyance. They call it the conveyance. It's really a peripheral canal, and we have to do it because it's not efficient to send all this water into the delta and then pull it out. And then you have all these environmental issues as a result of the delta. What the Northern Californians don't understand is that we built the California aqueduct to bring the water, and the dam to bring the water down to Southern California. And the state's creditworthiness is controlled by like 30% by those bonds. So let's say we stop buying that water and the state defaulted on those bonds, that would severely affect the state's creditworthiness. So we're in it together. And the other thing they don't understand is that Southern California has done a very, very good job of water conservation. We use the same water something like 3 times before it's actually expelled. And even though our population, since we built the aqueduct back in the 60s, even though we've grown, 4 or 5 times in population, we still use about the same amount of water we used back then. So we're doing a good job of water conservation. We just have to have infrastructure that ensures a steady flow, because as you were saying about the Colorado River, is that's drying up. And Nevada and Arizona and Mexico, who also has a right on that river, are calling more and more of that water. They haven't used it in the past, so we've taken it because they don't need it. But now they're saying, we want it, we need it, and California, you're just going to have to, deal it out.
Yeah.
Where do you think desalination?
Desalination is very, very costly. And the only way you can do it economically is in conjunction with a power plant. So we're not going to site any more power plants. So eventually the cost of water will get so high that maybe desalination is
I know an
possible
engineer
solution.
from Israel once told me that when you have no other source of water, then the cost is no longer a factor.
Yeah.
And you desalinate, which they did for the Sinai, and which they did for the southern part of Israel.
Well, we can still do a lot more in terms of conservation. You know that only 5% of the water that we produce, potable water, we use for consumption. The rest we use for landscape, for clothes, washing our clothes, washing our cars, hosing down our driveways, and so if we can use more recycled water for these other uses, and that's the other thing that got everybody all upset over Central Basin. Central Basin actually built a pipeline to provide that water, and because we have to do it, in order to maximize the water we have to do more conservation and more recycling.
So how can voters get in contact with you on your campaign?
They can go to calderonforassembly.org.
Okay, is that number 4 or Calderon 4 FOR?
It's FOR.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm told I have a Facebook account. I've not accessed it yet, but I'm a little slow on the uptake and on technology.
And then how do you have a headquarters opening yet, or?
We do over in Montebello.
Okay.
But we'll be reaching out in other areas.
Cerritos
we'll probably be using the Teamsters headquarters in Bellflower.
Okay.
And so we're going to be out there.
Talk about some of your key endorsers.
Wow. Well, I have all police and fire. I have the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Darrell Steinberg. I mean, I've got like 40 legislators have endorsed me. I've got local elected officials, and so it's pretty broad-based support.
Is Speaker Perez endorsing you?
Speaker Perez's policy is that he doesn't want to get embroiled in all these primary races, but we're talking, and we are friends, and he's supportive of my candidacy, but he has not endorsed.
Does it matter that he has his support?
What really matters at the end of the day is what I stand for and what I can bring to the table. My opponents make a big deal out of local endorsements. Local endorsements are good, but I didn't have a single one when I ran the first time. And I just got out there and I walked precincts, made phone calls, and got people involved, and I got elected. And I think any race is about who's in the race. It's not past races, it's not, it's about, if I'm the better candidate, then I'm gonna win.